10 minutes. And we'll just give an indication that when 8 minutes is up in case you want to take questions. But yeah, it would be great to have the opportunity to ask you questions.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
So thank you very much. So the floor is yours.
Okay, kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Christine Carnahan, Mayor, councillors and staff, thank you for this opportunity and thank you for all the significant work that's gone into the long-term plan, particularly by all the staff. That's much appreciated. I hadn't thought today that I'd come along with numbers or percentages or size or anything like that. I just really wanted to reiterate the overwhelming thoughts and feelings I had when I read the long-term plan consultation document. And without really wanting to be rude in any way, I have to say I was really disappointed and somewhat insulted. I feel that for a community to be asked that the three most important issues that we were being consulted on were car parking, cycle trails, which aren't even how we cycle down the main street of Carterton, which if you asked me about that, I'd have got my nippers and twist about that. But recreational cycling, which sure is important, and alleyways. Living now and thinking to the future for Carterton residents, for me there are two overwhelming issues front and foremost: climate emergency and water resilience. New Zealand has declared a climate emergency. Dr. Roy Carr has urged that we evaluate everything within a climate emergency framework. And where in this consultation process is there anything very obvious about climate change? Sure, there are passing references to it. There's a message in you mentioned climate change in your opening remarks, Brett, but it's in terms of adaptation, it's in terms of mitigation if something happens to the water supply or the wastewater. There's no actions, no saying the council is going to do this to help get our climate emissions down, either for the council or for the community. What is Carterton District Council going to do itself? What about replacing the motor vehicle fleet, moving to EVs? What about installing an EV charger in Carterton? There's only one in Masterton and one in Featherstone. It's quite a long haul if you're someone with an EV and we're trying to get people out of emissions cars. I know it's not quite in the role of this document, but I would like to see a really high attempt to get people out of cars and working with the regional council to improve the appalling public transport in the area. How will we ever get people out of cars if there's not decent public transport? Perhaps we should have little buses that move in circular routes from Masterton to Carterton or Carterton to Greytown, and that we link. The most important thing isn't getting from Masterton to Martinborough, it's just getting up the road and being able to know there's a bus coming in half an hour and you can use that. What about working somehow or other to help encourage solar panel stations? I think one of the overwhelming things is the need, looking at the fact that we're putting little subdivisions in. So apart from the inevitable water tanks, which will come again, there is more and more a need perhaps to think about putting in solar panels and making these little subdivisions resilient to perhaps power cuts that are coming through. They could have solar panels on the roofs and share batteries and be connected. That's what's happening in places like Bangladesh and Africa. Let's lead New Zealand, and actually there is one subdivision, I think in Auckland, set up by Vector, where they're off the grid. We don't have to be on the grid, perhaps it can be there, but let's make them stand alone. Food waste, that's 8% of carbon emissions. I know Mike Jones has previously been in touch with councils about having food waste pickups. He says there's a strong demand in South Wairarapa district for food waste collection. It would be great if that happens from Carterton and Masterton too, and we make a cost-effective food waste pickup system, because not everyone's got space to compost. I gather there's a waste minimisation fund which would help get capital start-up costs for that. So yes, and again then we have had a climate change advisor for nearly 2 years. But I noticed that her major activities are to support elected members and staff in their climate mitigation journey. What about the community? Surely we appoint someone to get overall emissions down in the community. And we'd like to see tracking of our emissions in Carterton District Council's emissions from, say, 10 years ago. The other issue, as I said, really is water, and it's particularly sensitive, obviously, when we've been sitting in a boil water notice here for time for about a month. You're probably aware we've got a water resilience session happening here, and that's our Plug my own meeting on Monday night. And that's come about largely from the dam and the various views there are in that. And interestingly, I noticed the dam is mentioned in the report and it's not even by any means certain yet, so that seems very premature by Carterton District Council to do that. Well, we know there's going to be 1,000 new houses in Carterton in the next 10 years and a population increase of 13%. Again, we just talk about identifying additional sources. Falls out of the sky, for goodness sake. Let's have these bloody, pardon my French, water tanks that one of the last times I submitted, Councillor Greathead said, we've been talking about that for the last 15 years, let's just please do it. 2008 Capity started new builds for toilet flushing and outdoor use. It's meant to be about half of summer's outdoor use of water. Let's just make sure that we're using purple water supplies. I've got a very good book about it called The Big Thirst, if you want to get inspired about what some parts of the world have done to minimise water usage. So please just make it happen. Some of these things I know come under a district plan, infrastructure plans, long-term plans. We as the general public don't know. I would expect the long-term 10-year plan to be overriding document to see some of these things here. I would just please ask you to have some strong leadership and not just reply. Look at ideas in a lolly jar. We did elect you to lead the community. That would be my final comment.
Thank you, Christine. Questions?
I want to borrow that book, please.
After Monday.
Not a question.
After Monday.
Thanks, Christine. I'm asking this of a number of people that mentioned the water tanks.
Yes.
Obviously with councils' reticulated networks, putting water tanks within the reticulated network is a sensible storage option.
Yeah.
But when we talk about tanks on individual properties, to what extent do you think ratepayers should be funding or supporting or incentivising that, and how much of it should be paid for by individual property owners?
I understand that Marty behind me here and Carterton and the community, Carterton community did a plan for you guys a couple of years ago looking at how it could be supported by council. I don't have those numbers to hand. To be honest, if someone's buying a new house, I don't see why the cost of a water tank shouldn't be part of that and shouldn't be required to be part of that. It's part of the community, the society we live in nowadays, and I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, I think it's, and I think I really look at it at the time for the new build, because it's not just, I mean, we put a water tank at the back just so I've got some water for the garden. But, I mean, the thing is to do it at the new build stage, so you obviously get the grey, purple water systems, and you flush your toilets and you maybe even wash your clothes with it. But it's, and it's all outdoor use. But it sort of starts leading into this, but we sort of make you start thinking about that. I mean, what are we doing with the water out of the wastewater system down in the south there? I mean, does Eucanishu need water that would be ideal from there or from Masterton's plans? We need to think much smarter about water, not just from everything from the new build to what industries. I mean, I have no idea what water supplies Beehive need, but they must wash down things. Certainly needs to be away from the wood clearly, but maybe there's equipment that they could be taking water from of the water outflow that was processed, and there are ways to do that. And we have to take the time.
Thank you.
The water tank on new builds has come up a lot, and I know that many of us new councillors have also raised it, and as Jill said, they've been talking about it for 15 years. That is something that we will be talking about in a review of the combined district plan.
Right.
So that is on the radar for that.
Good.
Any questions?
Christine, I just had a couple of comments. I think Carterton District Council is becoming more focused on climate change, and there are some good things happening there. Melanie's doing some good work in that space, and I know there's an energy assessment plan for all Carterton District Council's buildings and so forth. And there is a
suggest
black.
that she looks at Carterton's website, because they've got some quite good things up there to inform both the public and report back on what they're doing, so it's a good thing to do.
And they're also looking to develop a wide community action plan, so that will be good, so that individuals can take things out of that too.
Well, I see Master and I are talking about citizens' assembly or involving the public in that, so that might be something else to think about as well.
Sorry,
That's your time, that's my time.
sorry, Christine.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Christine, so thank you very much.
That's all right.
And we probably don't promote enough of what we are doing, but we do address climate change in all the decisions we make. But yeah, so if the points that you raised, we will talk about
I
at
think it's not
deliberations.
just thinking, it's actions as well as
Yep.
taking it into account.
So thank you. Thanks for coming along. Marty, want to come forward? So thank you very much again for your written submissions and also coming along today to talk to us, and also just to acknowledge the work that you've done in the community on lots of initiatives, so thank you. So we're allowing 10 minutes approximately, and
I will let you know when it's 8 minutes.
8 minutes, please, because we always like to ask questions. Thank you.
But before it starts, could I just first acknowledge the passing of Dave Cullen, from the Dunedin Mayor and President of the Government of New Zealand. E te masu haere tu rā, moi mai I roto I tō okonaki no mitu no kore, moi mai rā. A hori no ki a tātou katoa, ko mene mai nei, tēnei rā tēnā hoka. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just submission today. I've already apologised to Casey. I'm coming quite negative. It may sound quite negative, my comments today, but they intend to be constructive. And also I'm probably going to add quite a bit more than what was in my written submission, as Jane and Casey know, leave it to the last minute, and so it was rather brief. So let's start with rates. Reading submissions, there's an overwhelming call to keep rates in check. Focus on core infrastructure and services, and to consider the impact on ratepayers on low and limited income. Last election, each of you said that the most important issue facing council was rates. Every one of you said that. So this is an opportunity to follow through on that comment and have an impact for the next 10 years. Submitters want low rates, and you proposed a 5.7% increase in rates. That's quite significant, quite substantial, and many people will face double-digit increases. A rates review was planned and budgeted for last year. A tweak of the revenue and financing policy that you undertook, hidden in the draft 10-year plan, is not a rates review. So I'd like to know when that will happen, and also that the budget that was not spent on that has been carried forward, so the rates review can be done. As an aside, I would suggest that when you're going to consult on when are you going to consult on the changes you proposed to the revenue and financing policy? Because they haven't been raised in the consultation document, they weren't brought to the attention of ratepayers, and weren't mentioned in the consultation website page. So you may have an issue around whether that constitutes consultation. It needs to be adopted before you adopt the 10-year plan. So maybe something you should just quickly check on. Right, town centre car parking. I'd like to congratulate council and staff for a very readable consultation document, but I thought the presentation of issue 1, town centre car parking, was somewhat misleading. You said, I quote, there were 123 ideas in a big jar of ideas specifically about the town centre and parking. But analysing that list of ideas, only 83 included park. Of the 715, only 83 included park. Of those 83, 50 were about parks and reserves. Of the rest, there were disabled parking at the chemist, undercover parking at the supermarket, changing the car park time restrictions, enforcing the time restrictions, a bypass road, free parks, we already had them, Carrington Park, dog park, skate park, water park, theme park, cycle park, adventure park, trampoline park, bigger parks for recreation type, better parks, friendly parks, Clearville bakery car park, Park Road, Park Vale and Park for the Broadway tram. Of the 715 ideas, how many mention more or better car parking in the town centre? I don't think it was 123, it was 10. I think that spending $905,000 on providing more car parks is not justified. There are many other options, and they won't cost $2 million, such as angle parking in Masson, the rest of Broadway and Willywong Place, where you could build the building we own across the road and add more car parks there. That's not $2 million, it's not $905,000 either. Climate crisis. Again, kudos to the Council for including climate adaptation throughout the infrastructure strategy and asset management plans. As Christine said, there was significant discussion on commitments, risks and assumptions related to climate change in the draft 10-year plan, so well done. But I'd like to see more information available to the public on what you're doing, as you said, Rob. Climate strategy was adopted a year ago, yet it's not on the Council website. And there doesn't appear to be any reporting on progress against the strategy's action plan, certainly not public information. You should already be measuring the impact of every single proposal on Council's carbon emissions. But this doesn't appear to have happened for the car park options, which I suggest will probably increase emissions. And I think a proper analysis, not a back of the fag packet analysis, is what's needed. Perhaps you could also include a shadow price for carbon to your benefit cost analysis, like central government is starting to do. There's also a big gap in the climate strategy. Emissions of council should include emissions of its contractors too. And roading contractors must be big emitters both in construction of roads and footpaths and in their operations. Under the climate strategy, tenders will include a climate change component, but contracts should also require reporting on carbon emissions so that they can be counted in the council's overall emissions monitoring. Right, tucked away in the 10-year plan, the draft 10-year plan, council's proposing to lend $400,000 to Waterway Rapa Limited for the dam. Why was this not highlighted as a significant item? I really felt, reading through, that it was hidden. That may not have been to you, because you probably talked about it a lot, but on the face of it, it was really hard to find. It was almost stumbling over it. It's supposed to be a commercial loan. If the resource consents are not achieved, how they will repay that loan? What security do they offer? And will the interest rate cover the risk? As I said, ratepayers aren't a bank. There are plenty of banks around that will happily lend to them if the cost benefit stacks up. So I oppose lending ratepayers money to Waterway Rapa. And also something you should probably check too is that a commercial loan to Waterway Rapa will probably outside the council's investment policy, which states council does not undertake speculative investment activity. Council is risk averse. Council invests only in approved financial securities. Council invests only in institutions with a high degree of security and credit rating. I suggest this would preclude lending to Waterway Rapa Limited. Urban growth. I'd like some clarification around the urban growth strategy. It looks like the strategy has been costed in the 10-year plan. Is that correct? Over the next 3 years and every 3 years after that, capital spend related to urban growth strategy totals $4.8 million. It's unclear how that's funded. Over the same period, development contributions are only $1.3 million, and the road subsidy would be a further $1.3 million. That leaves a shortfall every 3 years of $2.2 million to be funded by more debt, I presume. So more rates will be needed to cover the debt repayment and interest. The contributions levies need to be urgently reviewed so that growth is fully paid for by new ratepayers, not subsidised by existing ratepayers. And a couple more minutes. Water race rates. I'd really like to know what water race rates are increasing by 45%. Rod gave me a call and made a suggestion what that might be, but I'd like a formal answer on that. And also why the Water Race Committee wasn't consulted. I spoke to John McBadgen. He said he was unaware of that increase. And why wasn't highlighted in reasons given in the consultation document or the draft 10-year plan? It's a 45% increase water ice rates.
Yes, do you want to take questions now?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Yes, the questions?
Don't really have any questions, Marty, but thanks for coming in today and bringing your constructive criticism. I've written quite a few notes on top of what you've already mentioned in here, and tomorrow we'll definitely be going through these and just double checking that we've got things right. And yeah, thank you for that.
I've just got one comment again, and going back to the district plan review.
Yes.
The development contributions are on our agenda for the next meeting on that, and that's been raised across all three councils. So that's something that is front and centre.
So I understand that's where they are, but the financial calculations should be done so that they cover what the costs are going to be. And I know that's going to be difficult because we've got the Productivity Commission and the government saying we should be keeping those low. But they've got to be realistic and they can't be subsidised by.
And that's what will be under review and under, I think, a fairly robust discussion, won't it, Rob, around in that committee? Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
You say, Marty, that you support doing the Trail 1 at 295.
Yep.
Are you happy that that's funded out of rates, or do you think that should be funded from other sources?
No, funding at a rates, but that's my opinion. If that's not
I've
something
just
that other
heard
people want.
that's right.
The whole thing is about rates should be kept low. That's really a call from people. Should be focused on the priorities that people have. If people submit and say they want new things, cycle trails, car parking in town or whatever, then that either means they're not aware of what it's going to cost, or they are prepared to give something else up.
But that's kind of a nice, those are nice to have things, and you were mentioning before about sticking to the basics.
No, I just want to thank you. Certainly there's some good points for us to we'll be deliberating on, and also some actions which we'll address as your so thank you. Very much appreciated. Is Tim here or Kat? Yeah, Tim, there you go.
Yep.
Come forward, Tim. I'd like to welcome you and thank you very much for your written submission, and also thanks for coming along to back it up with a verbal submission. So it's very, very much appreciated. So it's 10 minutes, and we'll let you know when 8 minutes is up, and if you want to take questions. But it's always good to ask questions. So
cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The floor is yours. Yeah.
Probably will be a bit quicker than that. Look, first of all, I just want to say 100% positive for the proposed new development plan. And congratulations for also allowing 2,000 metre square sections or the bigger sections to break up that sort of urban-rural divide, because right now, Masterton, Carterton, there's very much a shortage of those section sizes. And I do believe that section size you're going to attract larger houses and perhaps quality houses, residents, more likely to spend up in town. But my key reason for coming here today is to discuss a bypass. And I guess when we're looking at a 10-year development plan, we already know we've got some traffic issues in town as occurs today. So let's really plan a bypass, and off that bypass you can then plan some lifestyle blocks, some more commercial area, some roundabouts, because it's key in infrastructure of this town. So I was just going to say, to give confidence to the people that there's a plan for heavy traffic, that we don't want to be building million-dollar homes, which potentially could be very near or close to heavy traffic and noisy bypass road. And we also need safe major intersections for the new population on the east side of town, so that when they approach State Highway 2 and turn right towards Masterton, they can do safely. We don't want to end up in a situation like Masterton's west side of town, where every day there's queues when they want to turn right on Chapel Street. Okay? because now they're talking about roundabouts. Well, let's talk about the roundabouts first, and then the development around it. So the bypass options. Yesterday, 8:45 a.m. I went from our home on the corner of Short Road and Somerset Road. It took me 6 minutes to drive up Somerset Road, along Carter's Line, Power Road, down to the intersection with Waiheke and State Highway 2. 6 minutes. And then I drove back from there through town, up Somerset Road back home, and it took me 10 minutes. I'll give or take 10, 15 seconds, but that's a 40% difference in time. So already the locals know there's a bypass already, but the heavy traffic and that doesn't. So, saving time, getting rid of that traffic out of town, we need to plan the bypass. So that's one way about going the long route. However, there's still some shocking intersections up by the Deerstalkers Hall. The other one is Marshall Road, which I think is probably a bit more palatable for people. To me, it would be the preferred option. If that was widened and sealed, and then potentially continued along through to potentially around about Clearville, which I believe is probably in the plans, and that could also divert some of the traffic at the base of Somerset Road, which is a very dangerous intersection when you're turning right into Marston too. And that, if Marshall Road could continue on to Clearville, then there's another potentially site for commercial along that road. So getting on and off the State Highway 2 is going to be critical for planning commercial, and also critical for planning potential lifestyle, and even this new subdivision we're talking about, where people don't have to go through town to go north or south. They can come back to a bypass road to get into town. So to me, that's absolutely fundamental in planning before we even start talking about splitting up blocks. So that's my say.
Thank you, Tom.
Cool.
Yeah. Questions?
I guess I could, less of a question, but a reassurance that the current review of the combined district plan is exactly the place where things like designation for bypasses and stuff, where those discussions will happen. So that is the right instrument, and the review is happening over this period. So it's really useful that the community are talking to us about just those things. So thank you.
Yeah. But I'm also looking at it from a cost perspective, where if you're going to be interrupting farmland or owners of property, rather, the compensation to them would be almost like to say, look, I'm going to bypass through here. But what that may allow you to do is have a few options for some 10-acre blocks here rather than farmland. So that's your compensation in a sense for what we're trying to do. So, if it's well planned out in advance, I think these owners will be quite happy. Cool.
Yeah. Any other questions, guys? Yeah, no, thank you. And what you bring, we're well aware of, and as the Wairarapa is growing, there's a multitude of issues that need to be addressed, and that certainly fits into the game. Yeah. So thank you very much for raising it, Tim, and thank you for coming along. Yeah. Great. David. Thank you very much, and it's great to have you here, and thanks for your submission and also coming along today. And it's great to have you living in town instead of out at Webster now, so I hope you enjoy that. Yeah, but we've 10 minutes, and we'll hopefully have time for questions. I will let you know when 8 minutes is up.
Yeah.
So thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to say that, of course, I support everything that Christine has said.
Sensible man.
On the record.
Sensible man.
In reading through the proposed plan, although I'm not sure whether everything seems to be being parked into the combined district plan. And when I asked the question, all the questions that I've heard replied to this morning have all led to, oh, that'll be decided in the combined district plan. So I suppose I'll have to submit to that too. And the problem is there are so many things that one could submit to. I see that the rail company are holding a lolly jar type consultation for commuters on the trains into Wellington. That of course has a huge influence on Carterton and anything that's decided by the rail company, which the council has no control over, or apparently no control over. Transport, bus transport is the same. Christine mentioned, and other people have mentioned, the idea of shuttle buses, or even just a service train or bus to Upper Hutt. None of these are seen as being discussed in this document. It is a difficult task. I mean, there is the combined district plan. There's also the RMA, which is coming up, which will have major impacts in urban development. I noticed in yet another document, which was actually attached to the plan documents, and it's out for concurrent consultation, which I don't know how that works, but anyway. It says, this is from the Wellington Regional Growth Framework. It says framework, well, I'll just read this first paragraph because it's very typical of bureaucratic speech. The framework identifies improving west-east connections as an opportunity to unlock growth. Unlock growth? I didn't know it was locked up anyway. Improve resilience, I've got no idea what that means. Improve resilience for what? And improve regional accessibility to economic and social opportunities. That is complete gobbledygook, and that's littered throughout documents. Thankfully, I have to say, and congratulations to the council, your documents were much more easy to follow than this sort of central government or Wellington speak. However, it goes on to say the potential housing and urban development capacity of any future west-east multimodal corridors has yet to be determined and will need consideration alongside potential transport interventions. Now that's just following up from the previous speaker. We need to get these things in place. I have a particular concern as to the so-called, and even the use of the term subdivision. Housing developments, the suggestion will be 1,000 new houses by 2043, may be all well and good, although I'm not convinced that a town necessarily needs to grow. That said, the means of growing also needs to be very considerable care has to be taken over how it's designed. The idea that it's going to be subdivisions is one idea, and sadly we then get into the lot sizes of subdivisions. That's no way to plan a housing development. There's also the issue, which of course is very much to the forefront, of housing affordability. How are we going to bring that into that 1,000 houses? A friend here has mentioned $1 million houses. Surely not. Surely not. And certainly not individual single houses spread on 1 acre lots. Whatever, it needs to be discussed, and there's no discussion of it here. It's just sort of, it will happen. And of course climate change, which has been mentioned, is very high on the list, because all these developments have to be considered through the lens of climate development. So solar, one of the submitters I think talked about Carterton Solar City. Why not? There's been mention of water tanks. Why not? It could be done through a bylaw. I'm pretty sure it's very easy to do, and as Christine said, quite rightly, where is it? Pororua? No, not Pororua. Capity has had this in place for the last 15 years. So, to just maybe sum up what my concerns are, the climate change and the housing. Oh, sorry, no, the other thing, of course, is the main street. We talked about alleyways, and that's well and good, except one of the best alleyways is going to close down. Regent 58 is closing in a couple of weeks. And that's a really hybrid, local, social place that could and should be developed rather than being forced to. I know one has to work with the local landowners, and that's what troubles me is, what is the plan to deal with the public-private enterprise, especially along the main street? The main street is dying, it continues to die, the buildings are getting shabbier and shabbier. We have this, you've heard me wax lyrical about so-called earthquake-prone buildings, but a lot of those buildings could be repaired rather than an idea that they need to be demolished and then you have to have a new development to develop some new retail outlet. A really serious study alongside the building owners to find out what their views are, because that's something I think that the council can drive, because the main street is important, the alleyways are important, the design of the new housing that will, whether it's 1,000 or less, will inevitably occur, should be designed well. And I haven't even got to car parking. Putting in additional car parking outside the biggest school in Carterton seems to be counterproductive, irrespective of all the emissions and the backward thinking of providing for cars. We shouldn't be providing for cars. Even I'm going to get an electric bike and start cycling, which
Oh my gosh.
I know. So if you see me wobbling along the street, please avoid. Certainly it favours the bypass, because I will take up a lot of space. And finally, I mentioned the car parking. The bikeways, all for the bikeways, but whether they're a priority or not, I'm not sure.
8 minutes is up. You're 8 minutes, so if you want to.
No, I'm very happy to take questions. I don't think there's anything that I haven't covered in my notes and other speakers have covered about the three waters and dealing with that.
Questions?
I do have a question. So your submission said that you chose the option B, which is to relocate the council ops yards and put car parking. So you're saying that you don't support that?
No, I think moving this out of here and designing this area, linking to the park, and feeding it in, another feed into the town centre and into Holloway Street, which is difficult to access now, would be helpful. I think the idea of a small car park across the road is a good one. But I like the idea of the park coming around by the school. And that doesn't mean there shouldn't be some car parks, but there might be some facilities provided as well, which would be recreational oriented.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Other questions?
I could, to your comment about the district plan and stuff, I mean, we're really excited by there being so many submissions, and we don't get many opportunities to hear from so many of the community. A lot of the ideas that come forward aren't strictly related to the long-term plan. It's got a very specific purpose in the Act, but we are listening to all of those other ideas, and we're taking lots of notes, and we will keep those as an action list and bring them up, for example, in the district plan and in other things. So,
mine is just a knee-jerk prejudice response to the idea that
It's a grumpy old man.
I'm a grumpy old man.
well, I want to thank you for being grumpy, because we need to hear all these ideas
we
before
consult
those
a lot.
views. But thank you.
We consult a lot, but we need to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Very much
Easy for me
appreciate
to
it.
know what we're doing.
Yeah, just appreciate what you've done in the work, especially for the Craigaville building. So thank you. Right, Seth Rothery. Welcome, Seth. It's great to have you here. And thank you for the submission. and also for turning up to verbally speak to it. Very much appreciated. And yeah, it's a very relaxed environment. So you've got 10 minutes, and we'd like to ask you questions. So we'll give you a nod when his 8 minutes is up, and if you want to carry on, carry on. But the opportunity to ask questions. Yeah.
Cool. Great.
So thank you. It's yours. Yeah.
Kia ora everybody, my name is Seth Roderick. I've recently moved back to the Wairarapa. I grew up here. By way of a little bit more introduction, my family's been in this area for a very long time. I see Jill here, my grandmother, was really good friends with your mother. I recently moved back, partly, to be honest, the main driving factor for me moving back to the Wairarapa is climate crisis. And I specifically use the word climate crisis and the terms climate and ecological collapse instead of the word climate change. For me, climate change is a good word, because we know it's not that. I wanted to move to the country area outside Melbourne, but I looked at the projections, and that area is going to be desertified and without water inside my lifetime. So it didn't make any sense. I've moved back here, but because there's a higher likelihood, though not confirmed necessarily, that we're going to have water in my lifetime. I'm talking about really base things. I think another really important thing that has caused me to move back here and to want to integrate back into this community is the idea of food resilience. We think of ourselves as an area that grows a lot of food. Realistically, we're an area that uses food as a vehicle to make a lot of money. It's a very profitable agricultural sector that we have, but it's not necessarily an extremely resilient agricultural sector that we have. Climate and ecological collapse will lay bare this lack of resilience that this area has, and it's something that I'm personally working on in my own life. So one of the things I want to be starting to set up is community-based food resilience organisations that work outside of capitalism and outside of the dominant structures, to make sure that when, and I use the word when specifically, the climate and ecological collapse that we are heading very, very quickly towards and doing very, very little about, when it hits, that there is at least a base level of resilience to keep our families fed in this area. I look around, I'm 34 years old, I look around, I'm absolutely one of the youngest people in this room. I don't have really any power in this space. All the people who have power in this space are much older than me. Most likely, I will be heading this climate and ecological collapse. And I'll be about your age. Most of the people in this room, I'll be in my sort of 50s and 60s when it hits in really hard. And so I speak partly on behalf of people my age. And partly on behalf of the children that all my friends have at the moment. In this long-term plan, there are some wonderful initiatives. They are not enough. They are not dramatic enough. They're not drastic enough. They're not fast enough. Where I was living in Melbourne, in a suburb, an area called Moreland, we declared a climate emergency, which made the changes that we need urgent. Our national government has declared a climate emergency. I think it's really important that all of the councils in the Wairarapa and the Wairarapa combined declares a climate emergency and starts acting on it. In the submission, we've written, the climate crisis is now widely recognised as an existential threat to our future well-being with deep social, cultural and economic implications, as well as the fundamental environmental impact. Now that's kind of some words, right? But the reality of that is like diesel becomes 10 times more expensive. How do you think that's going to impact? You know? Like all of these things we're thinking of, we're making all these decisions and looking at these plans based on business as usual. Now I've become a builder. I'm building my own house. And I've been listening on Tradie Radio, an ad saying that mostly what Carterton's going to be doing is business as usual. I was dismayed at that. Because business as usual is careening towards a cliff. The best analogy I can give is, say for example, your teenage child has a terminal illness, right? And you've been saving for their college fund for, you know, their whole life. So there's quite a bit of money there for them to go to university. Now, at the point of them being a teenager, say they're 17, they're just about to go and use that money to go to university, but they've got a terminal illness. It makes no sense doing business as usual, continuing to put money into their university fund when they have a terminal illness. No. You pull that money, you pull those resources, and you throw everything at their illness. The type of disruption that we're facing is going to be catastrophic. And if we are not prepared, I mean deeply prepared, I mean really the floodwaters are rising, looking at saving just the most important things and taking a deep breath and going, we can't deal with that, we're going to have to let that go. Unless we're making those types of decisions now, we're definitely not going to be prepared. I'm doing my part to prepare this community outside of these types of systems. And I'm requesting that we take this a hell of a lot more seriously. That we really treat it as urgent, and that we put a hell of a lot more of our money, time and energy towards this. It is the absolute defining feature of my life. In a few months I'm getting a vasectomy. There's a few reasons why I'm getting a vasectomy. But one reason is because I've decided not to have children. How big does that impact? Whenever I hear one of my friends just got pregnant, she's 3 months pregnant. She's got married, pregnant, having a child, and she told me she was pregnant. Outwardly, wonderful, that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you, she's my best friend. Inwardly, I know what that child is facing.
Sorry to interrupt you, but would you happy to take questions now?
Happy to take questions.
Thank you for that. Questions? Just one question from me. As a council, and you've seen our long-term plan, and you see all the work that we undertake, if there was, apart from declaring a climate change emergency, if there was one action that we could take, what would that be? What would be the lead action?
So many things. Okay, I think the most important action in an area like this is being leaders in terms of understanding the situation. I've come from a situation in an area where a lot of people understand this and are working inside their own lives and putting a lot of pressure on local government and government in general to do this. The point of declaring a climate emergency isn't declaring a climate emergency. It's taking it from one agenda point to the defining agenda. The opinions of a lot of people in this area, and I've made a point of meeting a lot of people and trying to make friends across multiple ages and in different sort of areas since I've been back for about a year, there is, in this area, I've encountered a lot of soft denial. Things like, oh, maybe climate change is happening, but I don't think it's humans causing it. And there's a lot of people just outright now, and a lot of people locked into systems, locked into businesses, locked into agriculture, locked into different forms of making money and providing for their families, which I totally understand. That means that it is very difficult for them to be able to come around to the concept that this is what we're facing. Now these are the people who are the least resilient and going to be the most hit. And I would say as a council, it's your responsibility to make the case for how important this is and shift those hearts and minds. Usually a council will have to be responsive, which is what you're doing right now. Council has to be responsive to what the people in that area want. One of the problems in an area like this is that a lot of the people in this area do not have the foresight or the ability to think outside of the current paradigm, the situation we're in. They do not have the ability to understand and comprehend what's coming. Humans are very, very good at thinking in linear time. We think that things will continue the way that they are. We're dealing with a threat that is on a logarithmic scale.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, making that clear, leading.
Okay, thank you and appreciate your dedication to this and making us aware of it. And yeah, we'll be deliberating and climate change and its effects.
Climate change, climate emergency.
Climate emergency, climate collapse, climate and ecological collapse, because it's not that.
Yeah.
It's climate and ecological collapse which creates a civilizational collapse.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Seth. Much appreciated.
Thank you for your passion.
Thank you for listening to me.
Melanie, welcome Julie.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, yeah. And Mike, welcome Mike.
Thank you, Greg.
You sit in the talk chair. You usually do. I was eyeing it up.
So thank you, Julie, for coming along on behalf of Federated Farmers. We've gone through your submission and we've read it, and it's great that you're here to speak verbally on it too. So it's 10 minutes and we'd like to be able to ask questions, so we'll let you know when 8 minutes is up, and if you'd like to stop there, then you can ask questions, but it's your call.
Great, the party's all nights actually.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So Federated Farmers would just like to thank the council for the opportunity to speak on our submission for the long-term plan. So obviously Mike Butler, I'm currently meeting all chair for Warrior Federated Farmers, and sheep and beef farmer farming in Warrior. But we've got Julie Gaines here, Senior Policy Advisor with Federated Farmers. Thank you for taking your time to obviously read our submission. We'll try not to take too much of your time because I don't think Brian looks too comfy in that chair. So look, Fed Farmers is a membership organisation. We've got over 1,000 members in the Warrior province, and having someone who's able to speak on their behalf is part of the reason that farmers join Fed Farmers. And I'm sure that you guys all recognise that the farming sector is a significant part of the Carterton District Council community and economy. And on that note, you know, it's vital that the decisions that the council make, especially for future years, are the right ones. We've read the LTP summary and the supporting documents and find that generally we agree with the direction of the council. Making use of the uniform annual general charge mechanism at the maximum 30% rate shows that the council understands the concept of fairness and equity, where all rateable properties receive an equal benefit. The use of land value over capital value again recognises this concept. We understand the concern from council of affordability with lower income families and increasing rates, and we would encourage and support the council to proactively promote use of the rates rebate scheme, which is funded by central government, and council could potentially utilise existing relationships within the community and even assist ratepayers to apply for this on an annual basis. We are concerned with the public good judgment and the impact, including this is the impact the general rate has on the farming community. Farms may or may not benefit from a service such as curbside rubbish collection, yet there's a portion included in the general rate. We urge the council to be cautious and mindful of this. In addition, if the council continues to utilise the public good component, we would ask that the council ensures that for rural services the same rule actually applies. And the use of water races is an example of this. The Wellington Regional Council, for example, considers the water races to be streams or rivers and would apply freshwater regulations to these. And they recognise that the public benefit and an expectation, and with this the swimmable rivers, and that clearly indicates the public good component which we'd like the council to apply. So we've put forward an argument that on the dog stuff, that proportionately urban dogs have a much higher incidence of impoundment and a need for dog control than rural dogs. And it would therefore make sense that more revenue is collected from urban dogs. However, this doesn't appear to be the case, with the revenue from rural dogs effectively subsidising that service. We don't support an increase to the fees for rural dogs and believe there are more equitable ways to actually fund that as a service. Use of the UAGC or even a general rate could be considered due to the benefit directly received by all residents, ratepayers and visitors to the town. Rural working dogs are by their very role and nature part of a responsible ownership network, and that's reflected by a lot of other councils acknowledging this and charging a lower fee for those dogs. You know, it doesn't make a lot of sense that the first rural dog is charged at a higher rate than each subsequent rural dog. They create no additional cost for the council. We ask that the council considers this and the fact that the rural dogs are paying more than their fair share for this mainly urban service. We're requesting that rural dogs be charged a flat fee of $35. 36, I beg your pardon. We'd like to suggest that the council could go back to the drawing board on this one and acknowledge that it's simply not fair, and to ask the officers to find a way to fund the service that doesn't target rural dog owners unfairly. And to finish, would appreciate the council taking the time to reply to each of the submission points that feed farmers have raised once the final decision's been made. And we'd also encourage the council to recognise the time and effort each of the submitters to the LTP have made and take the same approach. So we thank you very much for your time. I've done it well under 8 minutes, I think. And happy to answer any questions.
Like you've had a bit of practice over the last year or so. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't mean so I've got any better though, Greg.
No, thank you, and thanks for the preciseness of the presentation and your points. There's a few of them there, so I'm sure there's questions. Questions? Yep.
Just on the Kiwi 2 Trust Covenant of Land that you've mentioned, are you aware of any other councils around New Zealand that have a similar system in place too?
Yeah, there are a number of councils that do have a rates rebate at the point that the Kiwi 2 Covenant is recognised, so I can actually get that to you if you want to.
That would be useful, thank you.
Great.
Other questions?
Mike, I'm interested in the cost recovery of forestry roads, etc. We have looked at it obviously in the past, and the forestry industry argue that their road user charges are swallowing up their maintenance basically. Our road maintenance is swallowed up in that. So have you got any other suggestions apart from forestry, and I know it's done in some other areas, of forestry surcharge on harvesting time? Do you know?
Warra District Council have brought in differential rates just very recently, so I'll possibly suggest talking to how they've implemented that. Because certainly, the data, it depends which stream of evidence you want to believe, anywhere between 30 and 60 times the amount of tonnage per year on average with the logging trucks. So they certainly do tend to the roads, which I'm sure you're well aware of. Julie, you've got...
Yeah, I don't know that about the surcharge on harvesting. I do know that there are targeted forestry rates that have been adopted by the councils, and they're based on the fact that harvesting happens over such a short period of time that the impact on the road is greater than over the 25 years that's the defence mechanism for forestry.
when the business case is built, you do have to evidence the additional impact of that, but that's been successfully done by other councils, so I see no reason that Carterton couldn't apply that same.
Thank you. Lyra, was it?
Yes, yeah.
Kaipara also.
Can I extend that question? So one of the peculiarities of us here in Carterton is that a lot of the harvest takes place in a neighbouring district, and then the traffic transits through our district. So given that the Rating Act doesn't allow us to sort of cross-subsidise, are there any examples of districts such as Carterton being that transit district, you know, having a lever to pull? Anything you know of? No.
Not at the top of my
No.
head,
Thank you.
No.
That's kind of where we landed as well.
Ideally, it'd be great if the road user charges came back to the district,
Yes.
wouldn't it?
Thank you.
So if we were to summarise,
Yes.
or if you were to ask us the question to summarise, what
I'd
would you
like you to summarise.
Please can you look at a public good component for the water races on the same basis that public good is applied across those same services in urban areas? And for fairness and equity, can you please reduce the rural dog charges to be the same as the subsequent rural dog charges on the basis that there's no additional cost for that first dog, and it's the urban areas that need the service, not the rural ones.
Yeah, just on that wider public good for the water race rates, we currently do fund 10% as a public good from the water race rates. Are you proposing to increase that?
Under the new, first of all, I didn't see that clearly. However, under the swimmable rivers and the new regulations, I would think that there should be a revisit on what that public good component is.
Thank you. During deliberations, we're obviously going to focus on key points, and I'm sure those two will be as well as addressing the other ones in the submissions. So thank you. And also just acknowledge a lot of the Federated farmers. We had Carol Williams come and present to us last week, which was fantastic, and we definitely see the town as a rural service town too, so it's very important that we interact with the rural community as best as we can, as well as support the rural community. So.
And we'd like that relationship to continue. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk with the rural community. Mike, would you like to come forward? So welcome, Mike. It's good to see you. Good to see you here, and you know how it works. Thank you very much for your submission, and thank you for coming along. And also, we've got 10 minutes, but please leave us time for questions.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. I think it's a bit easier being on that side of it. I've been on both sides. Yeah. Further to my submission, I've sort of gone through the long-term plan in a bit more detail, and I don't know whether it necessarily reflects what I would perceive to be the situation for our community in 10 years' time. I feel that one issue that really comes to my mind is we've got a couple of really old bridges. And I've talked to you before about the Copenhagen Bridge. And I can remember 20 years ago or so, and Russell might remember too, that two petrol tankers actually had a collision on the river, on the bridge, and one went partially through the side. Now, if that happened nowadays, that would become a one-lane bridge with lights and everything, and that would severely impact on the ability of the rural community to interact with Carterton. So I know that with climate change and electric cars and all that, petrol tankers mightn't be around, or so many of them around in 20 years' time, but it needn't be petrol tankers, it could be trucks. I go to that bridge a lot, and it's a real cause of concern. 92 years old, it's way past the 65-year lifespan, and the Gladstone Bridge is not too far off that too. So if I think, talking around, I've got no idea what it costs to build a bridge, but the biggest value is about 10 to 15 million. I don't imagine you've got the depreciation aside for that. It would be loan funded, I imagine. So that could severely, even though with a 50% subsidy, that could severely impact on this town in the future, or this community. I look at your overruns and your other, your wastewater, and we're looking at urban water. You could quite conceivably have a debt in 10 years' time with a $50 million dollar mark, easily, the way that the overspends have happened lately. $50 million debt, and then we look at what you factored in for interest rates at 0.9%. The next 10 years, 0.9% local government funding agency, 0.9 is the current rate for 1 year. I see Marsden District Council is factoring a 3.5%. Historically, councils have been paying 4.5%. Now, if we use a 4.5% interest rate on a $50 million loan, we're talking about an interest bill $2 million more than the existing $300,000 that you've budgeted for. So that's going to have a severe impact on the ratepayers in the future. It actually puts your KPIs way out of kilter. So I just urge you, before you look at these nice to haves, look at the must to haves. Also, I went into a bit more depth with your spreadsheets, and I couldn't make them add up. Now, I'm an accountant, and I was an auditor. You know, I specialised in auditing, and I would not pass this LTP for audit. Even on your little glossy there, you know, you've got on the highlighted there your debt, and I've shown you this before, the debt of 39 million in your graph there. Well, I think it's actually going to be projected 28 million, but there's a lot of confusion there, and you're asking ratepayers to make decisions on nice to haves without having accurate information. So, I really applaud you for improving the quality of your LTP, but the figures have to be right. And I don't know, I challenge the auditors, I don't know where they're coming from, but you know, to accept an interest rate in 10 years' time of 0.9% is just ridiculous. So wastewater, and I spoke at your infrastructure meeting there a few weeks ago. When I was involved in the project team, the initial budget was 6 million. I wouldn't be surprised if it's double that now. And I await the information that's going to be available in a few days' time, I believe. A lot of that is poor project management. A lot of the issues that we've got nowadays is poor community consultation and this sort of openness and transparency. And I can't understand why the information, the accounts are not available to you as well as to the public. I don't think there's been much public information on the wastewater and the costs and the budgets and the projections. And as we go through a project like that, there's always things that change. Well, I think the public's entitled to know. You're entitled to know. And I found as I was in my later years on the council that there was less information coming forward for us to make sensible decisions on, and you need that financial information. I think your IT really is putting you in a difficult situation and puts us in a difficult situation. Talking to Greg Boyle, now he was the original project manager for the wastewater. I was talking to him the other day. He sees the greatest risk moving forward with your wastewater is commissioning of the plant. no one involved now has any expectation in how the plant should operate. He suggests involving Andy Duncan or Stu Clark. Now, they were involved in the original project team. They are fairly local. Andy's lives in Masterton, Stu Clark just over the hill. They have a lot of knowledge, and they were the people that were implementing, instigating this system that we're putting in. So I really urge you to consider when you go through that commissioning stage, that re-engage with those original people. I sort of liken this to, you know, buying a new computer, and then when you turn it on, you find it's got a different different software package, and you've got no idea how it works. And this could happen. I've heard talk in the community of plans for a possible nursery on the land to be irrigated. Now, I know nurseries, their trees don't really uptake that much water, and from my understanding, it depends what size of nursery you're going to put in, but basing on 30 to 35 hectares, I would estimate the water usage to be about 40 to 45 cubic metres.
That's 8 minutes, Mike.
Oh, so, which is only around 10 to 15 days of standard wastewater flow. So it's not going to use much of your water. Where's the rest going to go? So we've lost and through this project and through the clock tower, I feel we've lost that community buy-in with your projects. Just that lack of transparency, lack of accountability, and lack of information going out to the ratepayers. I'm a bit concerned about your urban growth strategy. You still have 700 lots available within the town. There could be a move to decrease your lot size to make more available.
Did you want to take questions, Mike, or do you want to keep going? Yeah.
No.
Okay, so thank you. There's about a minute left. So, questions, guys?
I guess a question for you, Mike, as you left council, just over 18 months ago?
Yeah.
Were you sort of aware of these sort of issues that you brought up at that point?
Yes, and I feel that on the outside I can ask those questions easier than within the council. And I encourage you, I felt that we did not ask the hard questions of the executive. And I think we haven't challenged them enough. I think they feel we did, and I don't think you are. And there needs to be a bit more substantial seeking of information. I think with the clock tower, we should have got a bit more information to make decisions on.
Okay, that's
10 minutes.
10 minutes. So thank you very much, Mike. Thanks for coming along. And deliberations will address those points.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Richard Schofield. There he is. Good to see you, Richard.
Hi, you're at the corner.
So welcome, and thank you very much for your submission, and appreciate you coming here to speak verbally, but also we've got 10 minutes allocated, and yeah, we'll let you know when 8 minutes is up if you want to take questions, or just stop when you want to take questions. But go ahead, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate this privilege. I've heard some people with amazing expertise making submissions earlier in the day and again now. I don't have that expertise. I just have the expertise of a user. Now, I live 21 Hartley Avenue, just a utilitarian modern home on 1,000 square metres, and the rates are $80 a week. Number 19 alongside of us, a lady on her own, pensioner, $80 a week. Number 23 on the other side of us, same deal. Over the back from us, it's a retirement village. They're on pocket handkerchief sections. They're paying $70, $71 a week now. And I'm disturbed to see the proposals in the long-term plan, which envision spending a whole lot more money. One of the things that bothers me is we put out lolly jars. Now, in terms of consulting, that's fine. But next time we do it, I would recommend we say to people, by all means, put in your contributions and tell us how you think it should be funded. I think that would be a lot more relevant. We're getting to the point where a significant number of ratepayers are getting pushed on their rates. Now, from the figures I'm hearing bandied about here, they're going to be pushed a darn sight harder. So I'm against all three of the proposals that were circulated through the local paper. The bike trails, I think we've got a situation there not dissimilar to what occurred when we had the proposal to build the event centre. First of all, it was, don't worry, it won't be charged on the ratepayers, it'll be fine, we'll get the money elsewhere. Then came, oops, that was about 6 million, I think. And then came the realisation, and look, I'm as guilty as anyone, because I didn't spot it either. There was no ongoing maintenance plan. We've run the event centre at a wacky rate loss ever since it's existed. Now we're looking at bike trails. Every one of those bike trails is going to have to be entered through some mechanism that stops motorcyclists, the bobber boys, ripping it up. They will need maintenance. They will probably be vandalised. We'll need signage for the tracks. They'll have to be maintained, and we'll have to maintain the trails. And I see absolutely not even an estimate of what that background costing will be for council. They'll just fall back into general rating costs, just as these cost overruns for the event centre have fallen back. And they just become an integral part of the rates you pay. So we've got to be very careful about this. And also I see costs, and the council has necessarily produced some figures. Not going to be totally on council, those figures are probably already inaccurate and inadequate. But we've got guesstimates of cost, and we're facing as a nation a period when we have almost unparalleled cost inflation in the construction industry. You're jolly lucky if you can tell me what the shed at the bottom of your garden is going to cost, let alone building a house or building a motorway. Have a look at transmission going. So we've got to be very, very careful about ongoing projects. I'm not sold as a pensioner paying rates on the idea of growth is good anyway. Because it seems to me that every time we grow something, we add to the cost base in the council, and then, oh my goodness, we pay. I'm not sure who's going to benefit from the bike trails. Obviously some enthusiasts will, and we'll get some visitors here. But the benefits have not been subject to proper cost-benefit analysis. Some traders in the town will pick up a little bit of extra revenue. And some people will get a little bit healthier. They're not bad things. So I don't quite see what I, or the old age pensions over the back of my house, are going to get out of that, except higher rates. Now I'm also not at all in tune with the idea that council might become marginally or to substantively a developer in the town centre. For several reasons. One, the cost control doesn't look too good. Two, it's going to take capital, which we haven't got. And three, the moment you purchase land, it's going to stop yielding rates. So there's an extra cost in that. But respectfully, the council didn't have to close their eyes and go, ugh, to get 3 new shops, purpose-built shops, by the supermarket. They came about because developers saw the need, assessed it, took the risk, stumped up with their capital and provided, and I think that's the way it should go. We're looking in the long-term plan, because it came out of the lolly jars, that we need more parking. But I'm going to respectfully submit that we don't know what we're providing the parking for. Because most of those shops are going to have to go, or be radically re-strengthened. I know one of the, just average sized retail shop cost over $500,000 to refurbish and strengthen. That was done recently. I don't see that all the retailers are going to be able to hold their business and stump up with that sort of capital. And I don't see many of those shops surviving long term. So we don't even know what we would be providing parking for. And I think we need to let that shake down first. And I think we need to leave that to private people and private investors to work out as they can best. I'll be very reluctant to see council come into that at all. Moving the works depot, there's more cost involved. Now, please hear me well. I'm not against providing decent facilities for the people who work there. And if those facilities need to be upgraded, well, so they should be. But there's costs in the proposal, and I think we need to avoid those costs. I was very interested in one of the in Mike Ashby saying about the Copenhagen Bridge. Now, I grew up in the Broadway district, and the bridge by Brackenfield Farm was built in 1932. I know that because it was my dad's first job, and he was shoveling metal at 13 years of age. I think the Bankview Bridge is even older. No major bridges.
We're just coming up to 8 minutes. You happy to take questions or just finish off?
Can I just finish off?
Yeah, sure.
I don't think I've got a base to ask questions for. But one of the things I also note in the plan, I think Federated Farms let you off very generously, is that, and a former mayor brought it up, Ron Mark brought it up this morning with the Howick Road. I haven't seen tar seal extended into the country areas in years, except for Tiffin Road. The Tibora Road, I was out there recently, I don't think that tar seal is extended towards the coast in 30 years. But the rates have gone up. And I don't see any vision for the rural dwellers in this long-term plan, apart from maybe coping with some of the damage done by logging trucks. So I would employ you to consider those factors, but above all, from my age group, rates, rates, rates.
Okay, thank you. Questions? No questions? Okay. Thank you so much for your attention. Very much appreciated. Next up is Alan Withy. Thank you very much for coming along, Alan. And yep, thank you for your submission, and thanks for coming along to speak to it. So we've allocated 10 minutes, as you know, and we'll give you a nod when 8 minutes is up if you want to stop and take questions. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
I am a newbie in town, and I have copies of what I want to say if somebody would like to distribute them. About 20 copies. The first thing I noticed when I came to Carterton, for family reasons, I'm a fifth generation Bay of Plenty, right, so I'm a stranger amongst you. But I come from a city where very recently the council was replaced with 4 commissioners. I don't know if you followed that in the newspaper. And the fundamental reason why the council was replaced with the commissioners was that they were failing to plan. There were great infrastructure needs arising out of exponential growth, and the council was just frankly not grappling with the needs. So if you have a look at my notes, the first thing I noticed was the incompatibility of State Highway 2 and the main shopping business centre. The two are incompatible. I looked in vain in the district plan, and I looked in vain in the 10-year plan for anything about it. A bypass is a long-term project. And I want to focus simply on that. I could address you about all sorts of things in the 10-year plan, but I want to focus on bypass. It's already been mentioned a couple of times. Why would you want to listen to me? Well, I'm a qualified planner. I've been looking at vehicle-pedestrian conflicts for a long time. I had a similar career path to David McMahon, who you have just appointed as independent chairman for your district plan review. I'm about 10 years ahead of him because I'm now retired. However, you don't forget everything that you learnt while you are practicing your profession. And I still remember a bit. I've forgotten a lot, but I still remember a bit. Number 8 in my second paragraph. Back in the 1970s, I rejoiced in the title of planning consultant to Morrinsville Borough Council. This is before local body reform in 1989. Against the wishes of most of the shopkeepers in the main street, the council had the courage to put in its district plan a bypass proposal. If you go through Morrinsville now, heading east, coming from Hamilton, you will enjoy that bypass if you don't want to go into the main street. The shopkeepers were afraid that the centre of town was going to die. I walked down the main street a couple of weeks ago. There are only 3 empty shops. And I challenge you to go into any small town in provincial New Zealand and find a lesser number than 3. Number 3 is a very low number. So the town has not died and the shops are still operating. Number 9, it is an urban myth that bypasses kill towns. It just does not happen. The shopkeepers may tell you it's going to happen, but sorry, they're buying an urban myth. And I have recent experience in Cambridge, Harborough, Katikati, Tipuki, all of which have got bypasses, and the shopping centres have not died. It's an urban myth, people. Carterton is unfortunate because there is no through route north-south other than the state highway between Lincoln and Rutland. Most towns have a way through. Carterton doesn't, and that compounds the problems and emphasises the need for a bypass. Moving on to context, your long-term plan reveals $18 million turnover. 10% of it comes from NZTA, the Transport Agency, as it should. You're budgeting, that's 5 minutes by the way. You're budgeting 8.4 million in the Eastern Growth Area, and that's good. But there is a golden opportunity in that Eastern Growth Area to include a bypass, substantially at the cost of the developers and NZTA. This council must take the initiative, but you don't have to pay it all. In fact, you may end up paying a very small portion if you play your cards right. This is an interesting moment in time for Carterton District Council because you've just put out a 10-year plan and you're embarking on a review of the district plan. A great opportunity to actually grapple with the bypass issue. So my submissions to you in summary are, firstly, it is an urban myth that bypasses kill towns. Please remember that, if nothing else, from what I've said to you. Secondly, there are many urban design possibilities. I could advocate one, but I won't. I wouldn't be so bold after only living here for 12 months. It's a complex issue and it demands careful study. But I don't see anything in the 10-year plan allocating resources to do that study. And it's not cheap. A bypass policy is needed, even if that policy is no bypass. But reading your documentation in the 10-year plan and the district plan, one would be forgiven for thinking the council has no policy on the issue. I urge you to develop a policy, bypass or no bypass. And if you decide bypass, then it's got to be investigated, and that will take time and that will take money. I have managed some fairly large organisations, and I always said to my people, don't ever come to me with a problem without some solutions, or at least some options. I'm now retired, I've got a bit of time on my hand. I'm offering you the benefit of my experience if you want to form a bypass working group or whatever. Pro bono. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important, it is urgent. Even if you buy the doomsday predictions that you've heard this morning about what's going to happen when climate change takes over, we still have to live in the meantime and we still have to plan. I urge you to plan.
Thank you. You happy to take questions?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Questions?
Heaps, I don't know where to start. Thank you for your offer of tapping into your vast experience as well. That will be invaluable, I think, going forward, definitely. I've just got too much going on in my head at the moment, but have your contact details.
Yeah, do you think that, any other questions? No. Thank you, Alan, and thank you for your offer as well. And we will be deliberating on the bypass because there's quite a few submissions on that, and it is a big factor, and we're well aware of it. And it's how we address it, and that will be part of our discussions as we go forward. So thank you for the offer, and we'll be in touch with your overview of your submission, and just appreciate, especially being new in town and coming out strongly like this is very much appreciated. So, thank you.
Thank you for listening to an immigrant.
We love immigrants.
Thank you.
Is he trying not to come?
Robin Weaver.
Good afternoon to you all.
Yes, it is.
I have to say at the outset that I really don't envy you.
Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you, and thank you for your submission, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say to
Well,
support that.
I'm not going to beat you over the head, it won't take me 15 minutes, but my main issue with this town, when we first came to this town about 6 years ago, we asked about the reliability of the water supply, drinking water supply, and we were told, oh fine, no worries there, we've got plenty of water that will last us a lifetime. Well, now, every summer, since the last 3 years, as soon as the sun comes out, it's restrict your water consumption. We don't have the water that we need or that we want. We may have water that we need at the moment, but if we continue to expand the urban area, I don't see that we have the water to satisfy the needs of those new properties, new residents into this town. Now I noticed that there's 9.7 million in the plan to find and look for and build a new water source. But also I see that at the moment the council, or whoever wrote the 10-year plan, thinks there's sufficient water available to last us for the next 10 years. And it says a water conservation strategy has been developed that will include incentives, education, regulation, demand management, might mean, and operational means to reduce consumption and reduce water loss. Do I assume that we're suffering a lot of water loss? Who's water? Whose water?
Dave?
Yours, Dave.
With any reticulation system, you suffer a water loss, but we don't have an overly large water loss. We've done a lot in the last 2 years to look at the INI and address that.
Which is what I thought. We don't have a lot of water. So basically it's down to restriction, if we're going to last 10 years, on our existing water supply. And the restrictions can only get tighter if there are more and more people. Would I be wrong?
Yeah, the problem is there's a water storage issue, and we're addressing that in this first year of the long-term plan, so we can store more capacity in town, and that's where the predominant issue is.
We anticipate storing 4,000 cubic metres.
At the moment, we're all reliant on the town bores, and we don't have the capacity to store enough. So we are looking at putting storage tanks in the first year to increase that capacity to 4 days, and that will address a lot of that issue that you're talking about.
So I'll be able to water my lawn all summer?
I can't guarantee that, but Dave, you might be able to answer that.
That's what people want to be able to do. Right now, we're not allowed to, but they want to.
So the tender has just been accepted for 4 million cubic litre tanks to go in. They'll be in before summer.
Yeah.
And it's the Frederick Street. There's plenty of water availability. It's the speed at which it comes out. So the storage will help that. Will help that with addressing water storage, any water restrictions.
Okay, but you're telling me that the bores currently can produce 2,500 cubic metres a day?
Yes, it can.
So if the stream stops flowing in an earthquake or whatever other disaster might happen to it, 2,500 litres a day is it?
That's at peak supply. Maybe we could chat about that.
Yeah, all right.
We take on board your points,
yeah,
but we are addressing.
Now just looking at the 3 items in the consultation document, I think I expressed my opinion in my submission fairly well. Town centre car parking. Yes, it would be lovely to have it, and we need some more. Why is multi-storey car parking not considered? Parking?
Expensive multi-storey buildings is...
But is it not more expensive to have land just available for somebody to park their car on?
So these sort of questions I think we'll be discussing in deliberations as we go through. So if you just make the points, if you don't mind, and then we can use it in deliberation.
I recognise that you need a new building, and there's a possibility of space becoming available there, but it's only for about 100 cars, as I understand it, so I don't think that's enough. And the 5 town, well, you've heard people talk about the 5 towns trail project. I think it's got to be done. It's got to be done properly, and you can't afford to do it properly. You can't afford to do it in concrete or hot mix and put street lighting on it. All the things that are needed for safety of the people using it. I don't think you can afford it. And the bridges. It's not just one bridge. If you're going to theatre, Greytown, you've got 3 to deal with. I don't think you can afford it. So I forget that. In town centre redevelopment, alleyways and passages and what have you, I'd love to know how it's going to be done, how the landowners are going to give you the land to make a passageway. That's it. So thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Robin. Questions?
No.
I think you've left us with more questions.
I noticed in your submission you talked about lime paths.
Yeah.
And what are the issues with those lime paths from your perspective on Lincoln Road?
Yeah, we've looked, have you been down to Lincoln Road lately and seen the weeds now encroaching on the line?
Right.
You know, whereas Wanganui and Rotorua, yeah, Rotorua's done concrete.
Yep.
One of those done a lot of boardwalk stuff along their waterfront, they're lucky to have a waterfront. And then they've done concrete annual hot mix all the way through to Castle Cliff, 6 kilometres up, with street lights. It's brilliant. If we can't do it to that standard, then I don't think it's worth doing.
Okay. Thank you very much, Roland. Very much appreciated. And as we enter the deliberations, we'll be addressing those
I look forward to reading about it.
Yeah, and we'll be in contact with you anyway. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to carry on with the written submissions. So we'll re-adjourn that at number 22.
So we jump back and do
Number 4.
Number 4.
You skip number 4.
Okay, number 4. That with me. Excuse me, could we just be quiet? Yep, thank you. Okay, so bypass.
It's already up there.
It's already up there?
Yeah.
And we want to know what the enter deliberations that we discuss is offer, and also looking at funding for a bypass investigation.
Because you've also mentioned a roundabout at Pembroke and High Street for the meantime.
Yes.
Do you want to put that on as a separate item, or put it as a bypass discussion?
No, I think you can probably put that in there. Just want to mention it as a separate.
Yeah. So it's just it comes to State Highway 2, wouldn't it?
So,
through the town centre.
yeah, so roundabout access from the Eastern Grove onto State Highway.
Pembroke won't give you that. No, it won't be that.
Yeah.
Around it, these congestion too. Yes, it's just State Highway through the town centre. Through the town.
I think we did
22 we're up to, I think.
Yep. So number 22, David and Jacqueline Bloomfield.
I guess the take-out point is to be prudent around spending money, but still to move forward quickly with the cycle frame. So it can probably come under our rates discussion /
I think so. Is everyone happy with that?
Yeah. It is indicative though of the conflict between people wanting rates, austerity and spending, and we need to tell that story better.
Yeah, because they're basically saying on this, not to spend on infrastructure, but to spend on the cycle trail.
All of the cycle trail.
Yeah, to move more quickly with the cycle trail.
Council to spend less money.
Which is in contrast to a lot of the other submissions.
I know we'll talk about in deliberations, but the concept of the Five Towns Trail is not to, not for council to fund it, but just seed fund bits and pieces of it. And that will become more clearer as the Five Towns Trail master plan comes out. Okay, next one, number 23, Jeffrey Ranger.
There's no additional comments on that one.
No? Okay, number 24, Max Sedcom.
It's the car parking.
Tracks.
Car parking, yep.
Ah,
Oh, let's get rid of the solid white line. Isn't that Waka Kotahi? Seeing it's on State Highway too?
No, we do.
We do? Okay.
So what's he saying, that the cars are travelling too close to the centre line? And he thinks that we should encourage them to spread out?
Some of the cars, on your car park, you've got a dotted line which is actually car park, and about that far out, there's a solid line that runs right down the side.
Oh, yeah.
People can't park properly, so they park along the solid white line, thereby negating the safety margin that's built in.
Right, understood.
Is there...
So that should come under a discussion for town centre car parking.
I'm just wondering if, is that the solid white line, is that a requirement because it is State Highway 2? Yeah.
Okay, we comfortable with that? Yep. Okay, number 25, Jack Ponting.
So he wants that top end of Broadway, left in, left out,
Yeah.
parking on Broadway.
Gee, I've played that before, haven't I, Russell?
No.
You sure?
So again, you know, there's a big focus on parking and roundabouts and left rights out of in the town centre. So is that a generic conversation?
That is the first one that suggested removing car parks from State Highway 2.
There is a lot of comments though throughout the submissions around general parking and more disabled parking or less 5-minute parking. And I'd really like us to do a bit of a review of the town centre. I don't know if we can put that on as like apart from this
talk
part.
about that parking stuff.
Yeah, we could, but I think it is somewhat of a separate issue.
It's not an LTP issue.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, we're comfortable with the rest of his comments? Yes, it's been highlighted in the summary in the report. Bonnie Macbeth.
So, cycling, doesn't feel parking is a priority.
So the other one's just rates, which is already on the board, and everything else is covered as well.
Thinks that council buildings should remain in the town centre. I don't know if she's referring to the yards or the offices. Yeah.
So all those will be discussed in the deliberations. Jane Burns, that's been covered. Carterton's been covered.
You don't have anything up on the board at the moment around new environmental.
Is this one?
Where's that?
Holly.
Hollies.
We've just got
Sorry, Bonnie.
We've just done 28. Oh, sorry. It's Steve Rigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 29, Jane Biggins.
confusing us.
Yeah.
Well, this is the name of the solar
So 29 Holly Gooch.
Up to items on for deliberation, I guess. Yep. Environmental initiatives and identity.
Food town.
food producing area.
Okay, well, we can, if we're comfortable, we're going to deliberate on those feed them today. Number 30, Mike Palmer.
Footpaths.
Footpaths, water.
nice if somebody had Facebook issues.
Sales rep.
It's down the bottom of the original.
What's that one?
Rude comments.
Not having to front up on anything. Okay, number 31, Brendan Renal. Noted. Ann Nelson.
Damn, that can be a deliberation issue.
Yeah, we've got that up there, the offside code. Or
Is
white
that as
water.
water supply?
Water supply, yep.
Is that a LPP issue or?
Well, no,
Well,
it's,
the loan,
The loan.
it's addressing the loan.
Well, I was
stuff.
just saying, the council is considering making use of the proposed dam as a water source in transparency.
You should be informed about thinking behind the proposal to lend WWL a large sum of money.
Do you want to have anything up there about the consultation document she's mentioned?
That made me think that she hadn't actually realised there was the actual LTP document underneath. There's a few kind of made that comment.
And it's quite, I went back and had a look through it, and there's on a number of pages it definitely points you where to go to find the full document. It wasn't hidden at all, it was on 4 or 5 pages in the consultation document, so.
So we've got that, Jane, under what period? Right, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to
Environment initiatives that should cover climate change.
Sean Eves.
Climate change once again.
Climate change.
Green transport options.
So do you want to put climate change up as a issue?
Yeah.
Yes.
Please.
Without a doubt. There's quite a few issues have been raised on our role in this space too.
He's asking for public charging stations for EVs and
Yeah.
stuff.
Should we just add greener transport under that as well?
Yeah, green transport options, yeah. Okay, comfortable with that? Yep. Okay, Derek Moore.
Full steam ahead with £5.
So looking at cycling infrastructure in and around Carterton.
Sort of, I get a lot of this coming through. Now, I really struggle with the fact that he says there is a severe lack of safe walking cycling infrastructure. The town's littered with footpaths. I really thought they were for walking on, and they're pretty safe, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I reckon we're actually pretty damn well suited. You can almost go through the whole of Carterton on footpath or on some form of long trail. It's probably, if you got to Brooklyn Road, there's probably nothing out to Delphi Road. But yeah, I really struggle because I think we've got a bloody good footpath network, and I think we've actually got a reasonably competent trail network there, isn't it? Sealed footpath. So it's just my comment. I appreciate their point of view, but I would suggest that we've actually got something that's pretty damn good compared to a lot of other places.
It's that silent majority again. You know, this is the squeaky wheel.
What do? Do we listen to the one person that says something, or do we listen to the people saying nothing?
Yeah, so when we deliberate, we'll address those, yeah, but, yep, we'll take them, Russell, yep. Alan Hurd, yes, sits in the summary. Robin Weaver, just heard from Robin, so comments out of that.
Water reliability, multi-story car parking.
I struggled to hold my tongue with him with regards to the wanting to water his lawn all summer, because that's totally counter to water as a scarce resource, you know, water conservation, water austerity, you know, treating water with the respect that it should have.
In Sydney, we had 12 months of the year where we weren't allowed to wash your car. Like there were water restrictions, like flat across the board. So it's something that is happening all around the world.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, but people shouldn't expect to do what he expects.
Hey, it's very tempting to have these conversations now, but I think we just need to focus on what we're going to deliberate. I mean,
Sorry.
yeah, I agree. No, it's very.
Apologies.
No, it's all good. Yeah, so any other points from Robin?
Oh, just
There's a few questions that he raised.
Yeah, the point about doing the trail project cheaply and wanting it to be infrastructure done properly.
And the fact that there's 3 bridges.
Yeah, and it's the affordability that comes down to the affordability.
We've got 3 already, got 2 in our district. 3 areas. Oh, of course. Correct.
So without going into detail now, the essence of the Five Towns Trail Master document is to address those issues?
Yes. Yeah. So it's being addressed.
So we have that conversation.
Yes.
Okay. So number 37.
Pedestrian crossings.
Yep. High Street North. That comes into the town centre discussion, isn't it? Okay, so happy with that? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, MC Gowers.
Historical Society.
Yeah, we're going to have a conversation on that. Yep. Des and Irene Lewis.
Basically saying, look to spend less, but I think we're already doing that with that relocation, reusing the offices out at Dalton Fund.
I think she's talking about the office block, relocate the existing office block and buy a prefab building. I think that's the main office building she's talking about, is my
That's what I read as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to look at the.
No, she's talking about converting shipping containers into the office. She must be talking about Dalton Farm for the ops yard. Yeah. She can't be talking about the main building.
Okay.
Either way, it's relevant to both of those.
Yeah.
Taken down in Christchurch. Absolutely.
Wow.
Okay, number 40, Tangela Tavich. Oh, Tangela, okay.
Infrastructure. Yeah. Also smaller lot sizes, so that's DP stuff.
So district plan.
Yeah. Okay, so we're comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Toby McDonald.
Wants more investment in rural roads.
Well, that's not what he actually said, but we're assuming that's what
Get the
he wants.
basics right before doing nice to haves, i.e. roading.
Yeah, well, we're going to have a discussion.
Oh,
on
yes,
rural roads,
true.
aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, so Don McKinnon.
That was a funding request.
Yeah.
10K over 3 years.
So we'll address that in the deliberations, yeah.
So a lot of our neighbours, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have in their long-term plan submissions, if you were applying for funding, that was through the LTP process, because I know when I was doing it for balloons, I used to have to put submissions in and then go and present, so they probably are doing sort of a bit of a blanket generic request for funding, because it's LTP.
And that project's been presented to local government in many forums over the last few years. But, okay, so we'll address that.
So I think actually the McKinnon, I was going to research this a bit more, I've forgotten about it, but McKinnon is a local name, and I'm pretty sure he's on our cenotaph as one of the soldiers that died in this very last battle on World War II. And I know this because it was my research project in Year 12 history. To go pick a name on the cenotaph. So I don't know if that's where it's coming from. He's specifically targeting us.
No, the submission will go to every.
It's going to
council.
every.
Yeah, and it's not. He's just the figurehead collective in his.
Okay.
thing. So yeah, every council would have got that submission.
Interesting.
So
So
we-
it's for something in France.
Yes, it's for the memorial.
Yeah, and it's probably not that guy because he's signed it. Like,
No.
he's the chairman.
No, I know, he may be a relative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can we actually send this to the grants committee? Because I would prefer if things like that all went to the grants committee, including, maybe not dark skies because that involves potential staff, but yeah.
So I think it would, as a matter of course, in the reply, is letting them know when our community grants are open.
Or just say, well, we can send this directly to the grants committee. They don't have to send anything else in.
we're happy to make that call now?
If anyone else is happy with that.
Sounds good to me. Okay.
Give Dale something to do.
I mean, you might want to think of when you do that, there's a submission, and I don't know how much they're asking for, but if it's a significant amount, you might want to think about increasing the size of the grants pool. You want to include some of these.
It's pretty tight already.
Yes, so I think that should be still part of your
Yeah.
deliberations, whether
Yeah.
you're happy with the size of the pool.
Okay.
I'm actually just thinking as well, does our grants policy allow us to fund stuff that's not within the region, or
We have local community
Good
grant,
point.
and then we
or like
have,
overseas? I'm saying like this is technically
Oh, yeah.
going overseas.
because we have regional community
Yeah, regional,
grants,
but that's
and then we have local community grant.
Okay, so we'll leave it to the deliberations
Yeah.
and maybe you can do a bit of work. Yeah. Okay, and I'm going to adjourn the meeting and we're going to have lunch. Thank you. And thank you very much for the session, that session.